Statistician General, Pali Lehohla. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you very much.
You are saying today that this is the worst on record, which sounds very alarming. Just tell us when those records began. What sort of stats have we been keeping over time?
Prior to 2008, we covered employment numbers half-yearly. From 2008, we started working on a quarterly employment, and that gave us observations on a cyclical level, quarter by quarter, because seasons actually affect employment, particularly generated from agriculture. Prior to that, unemployment levels in South Africa around 2001, 2002 were 30%. And then it started dropping as economic growth improved, probably reaching the bottom part in 2005. Where it was hovering around 22, 23%. And then it has been on that stable, high-level unemployment. And of course, rising to 26.7 as we see today is the highest unemployment rate ever seen.
Since we've been keeping those surveys, because I think you said
since we moved to a quarterly labour force survey.
Okay, because you were saying at one stage we were close to 30%. So we're now at around 27%. It's not the worst ever, but it's pretty close.
Well, since we started collecting quarterly, this is the highest. Prior to that, we were around 30% before we actually dropped in 2005 and then moved quarterly.
You always say that you just look at the numbers, but do these numbers, are they saddening you today?
No, I don't get saddened by anything. I would be sad if the methods are wrong. Mine is about methods. We apply the best methods the world has ever seen, that South Africa has ever seen, and gives us these numbers consistently.
So at least we know that the numbers, dire as they are accurate.
They tell you the truth, and that's why moodily, on the basis of quality of numbers that South Africa produces, we'll never doubt you, or the IMF or the World Bank.
Yeah. I was looking at the informal sector numbers, not as much as the formal sector jobs. That has been contentious in the past. How do you count the people who are selling sweets on the side of the road, for example? They're not paying tax. Does that count as an informal sector worker?
Yes, they are informal sector. They are not registered. And of course, our survey methods are household-based. So you go to a household and say, how do you make a living? They'll tell you, we sell sweets or we work, like I work. And then that whole range of people that are in these households are covered in terms of the employment situation they are in. And of course, they may not be registered, so you know that they are functioning in an informal sector. There is another side of a measurement of employment, or rather jobs, which is the quarterly employment survey, which is an establishment survey. It's directed at businesses, but that covers businesses that are registered for VAT.
Are you surprised that there are not more people informally looking for work, given that they cannot find jobs in the formal sector?
Well, I mean, you would find people dropping out of the formal sector because it's a very risky environment. You have meager resources. You plant them there, and then they go with so you are in worst case scenario in the informal sector at times. And when times are hard, although many people move to the informal sector, but it also loses jobs because it's a very precarious sector itself.
Just looking at the way you collect these stats, also you're looking at people between age 15 and 64.
Yes.
In my mind, we're living in an environment where a lot of people can't retire at 65 anyway. They still have to remain in work, but we're not looking at those people.
Yes, it's called intentional errors, where you actually say you are out of the range that we are looking at. Obviously, in time, I think we'll have to look at that because pensionable age, particularly in Europe, where people have to continue working, the upper limit of working age has to be extended.
Yeah.
64 doesn't make a lot of sense.
Are you concerned about the sectors giving up jobs? Construction, trade, manufacturing. These are very important sectors that the government is looking at.
Well, particularly construction, given the kind of labor force we have. South African labor force, particularly the black labor force, I mean, it's not technically educated to deal with all the things of the modern economy. The one thing that they can do adequately without a lot of time spent on training is to be in construction and agriculture. But these sectors, particularly agriculture, is highly centralized, mechanized, and doesn't allow for that kind of space. In Brazil, for instance, agriculture is a sector that employs quite a number of people. In South Africa, not so much. And of course, if you move around the country, you see the land is fallow. You can't expect a lot of people to be working in agriculture, particularly subsistence agriculture.
Construction, also a concern. A lot of construction firms calling for more infrastructure spend. Are you willing to venture? Is there a case here to say we need to be building more things, maybe even government-led
Well, no, we just
infrastructure?
measure. We don't build those things. If government or state decides and the private sector decides to go into construction like we did in 2010, we'll see the number of jobs booming there. Ours is just to measure.
Is there anything here, any trends in metros, in municipalities, which is interesting, ahead of local government elections? I was interested that in Gauteng, it looks like metro areas are doing well, in the Western Cape as well, but then in some provinces you say non-metro areas are better at creating jobs. Can you explain that?
Well, I mean, the issues around South Africa, around urbanization, it's a very complex set of circumstances that drive employment, both in metros and non-metros. Gauteng and Western Cape in particular, Western Cape, you see that, for instance, the NDP says that absorption rate should be 61% by 2030. Western Cape has an absorption rate of 58%, almost close to that absorption rate. However, still has a high unemployment rate, although it's the lowest in the country.
Are there any other trends, province by province, gender, anything you're noticing that's changing?
Well, at the global level, of course, we want provincial breakdowns. More rural provinces such as Eastern Cape, Limpopo, KwaZulu-Natal do show high levels of unemployment. And largely,
is that because everybody's flocking to Gauteng and Western Cape?
No, not really. It would give them lower unemployment because everybody has moved out of the province. But that number is not as big. It's not adequately big to reduce what would be pseudo unemployment in that space. But it increases unemployment in the urban areas. So the complex of urbanization and employment, particularly in South Africa, and education, it's a very interesting one. And as well as spatially where people actually reside. One of the things that we are seeing, particularly across the country, is that the urban space is not well managed. The policy environment says we will densify along corridors. But you see a sprawling town, a sprawling city, and therefore making employment and job search very expensive because people stay far away from where jobs are.
And it's interesting because it affects transport, services, things that make your life easier.
And when you look at, for instance, we ran a citizen satisfaction survey in KwaZulu-Natal, and you look at the distribution of services and so on, you would have expected that they would cluster around satisfaction, around dwelling, but they are all scattered around that, showing that there is no coherence in terms of how policy delivers.
Okay, well, I hope
or at least the challenges towards how policy delivers on these things.
I hope we can learn a lot from this, despite the dire figure. Thank you for joining us, Statistician General Pali Lehohla, confirming that these are the worst figures since current records have been kept. Not the worst ever, but we're pretty close to that. Now, Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan